morning and welcome back. Our guests now are two of the certified counselors from the YBTJLouRuspijrfoundation who travel to our local high schools and colleges and train and talk to kids about what it is that they need to know about the help that's available when they become so depressed that suicide begins to become an option.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure. We go out into the schools, like you said, middle school, we've done high school, colleges, we've been to agencies, and we give a PowerPoint presentation that covers a variety of topics. Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. We like to cover self-esteem, eating disorders, cutting, any of the issues actually that the schools would like us to cover, we can tailor it to them. We present in front of the smallest audience, the biggest audience, and we just basically tell them what is mental health, and we go over signs and symptoms of all the disorders, and then we usually end it with the suicide information, prevention information. We like to keep it interactive, we accept questions, and a lot of times after the presentations, students will come up and they'll share their stories, they'll disclose, and if necessary, we will get them help right in that moment.
Wow. And bipolar. Robin Williams they've suggested he had a bipolar condition. Mm-hmm. That is almost a taboo topic for so many people. I think it was Mike Wallace that announced on the air that he was bipolar. But it creates an enormous stress on a person. And I would assume that an awful lot of the suicides are from that category of individuals that go untreated.
Well, bipolar disorder is a common diagnosis. It should only ever be diagnosed by a psychiatrist, even if people believe they're having symptoms that seem like that. Depression, though, is the most common diagnosis for people that actually complete suicide, which is really scary. And something you're speaking to, Todd, also Christine and I discuss often, is that mental illness is considered a stigma. Talking about suicide is considered a stigma, meaning people don't want to be identified with having something wrong with them. And we really try to emphasize with the students and the RAs and the teachers and staff we speak to that it's no different than having a physical illness in some ways, in that when you're physically ill, you go to the doctor to get support and help, and you do what you need to get better.
I've always believed that mental illness was a physical illness. There's a physical component to it.
Absolutely.
It's what happens with the brain and the different things that we have in our brain that allow us to understand things. The people that I see, and I see a lot of depressed people on workers' compensation, I just heard during all the discussion of Robin Williams that suicide could be as high as 15% among clinically depressed, seriously depressed people, which to me was a huge, huge number. But I see it, and I talk to my clients because if you've been on workers' compensation and unable to work for 6 months, you're going to suffer from depression. You can't miss. Number one, you don't sleep well. Number two, your finances are a major worry. Number three, your self-image is shot because you're no longer the breadwinner of the family, or people feel you're a stress. And I would love to see more counseling available for injured workers and their families. And it's, boy, is it tough to tell a guy who's been the breadwinner of the family in front of his wife that he's depressed. It's absolutely mad at you and doesn't want to talk about it, but his wife will sit there and shake her head yes. How do you deal with that in your practices as far as convincing one or the other members of a husband and wife team that they need to get help?
Well, suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in the United States.
Wow.
So that's also a pretty powerful number. I guess what we could say that we do, trying to encourage people to go to counseling and to find help, we basically try to normalize it. We like to, in larger groups with our clients, we'll say, this is happening to everybody. It's not something that maybe people talk about because of the stigma, but we offer support. We like to leave people with the sense that when they walk out of there, they're going to look around and they're going to say to themselves, yeah, people are going through this too. This is something that is common and there's help for it, and not to be ashamed of it.
I tell people, if you're not depressed, there's something wrong with you. And it's true. I mean, if you've gone that long without a job, without a paycheck, being dependent on what many people think is charity, you're going to be depressed. And if you're not, there really is something wrong with you. You've lost touch with reality. But we also have the problem of our veterans coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, most of them having done multiple tours. Post-traumatic stress disorder seems to be a stressor that causes suicide. There's a huge uptick in suicides among the veterans. Have you seen that? Families that you've talked to?
Well, I don't work with veterans in particular because the organization I work for works with people on medical assistance. So a lot of times they're receiving veterans benefits. But what I do know is, what I've heard is, veterans have to go to greater lengths to be able to find the mental health services they need because they're very specific to the VA and they're harder to access. There's also talking about stigma. There are huge stigmas around being a man and a military person and coming back from the war. Not that it's just men that are having these thoughts, but it's really difficult to come back from serving your country and having these symptoms and not being able to fully understand it. The other piece about that is that I talk a lot about life transitions. Different types of significant life transitions can really be a risk factor for people to feel like there's no answer other than taking their own life. And one of those could be coming back from serving your country and having to readjust to living a civilian life. It could be really challenging for people.
We see an awful lot of our veterans that come back from the National Guard. Guardsmen have been overused in these two wars. And what happens to them if they've served 3 or 4 tours, they become dependent on being on active duty in the Guard. So what they end up doing is ignoring the symptoms and the signs of post-traumatic stress disorder because it may prevent them from continuing to serve. And it's a terrible situation. We did a show not too long ago down at Monsignor Kelly's wonderful veterans facility that was just built. And they're dealing with an awful lot of homeless vets that just have given up on so many different things. You mentioned to us at the break that you also are training residence assistants at the colleges. Tell me a little bit about that and how that's going.
Well, I'll start. Most recently, we were at the Commonwealth Medical College, which was really exciting. There were 26 faculty and staff there that were really excited to hear the information we had to offer, and we're going back in October to speak to the entire student body. And what I'm finding is that the students that are serving as RAs or going to be in more supervisory positions are really eager to have the information. And every one of them, it seems, can identify with knowing someone that either has depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, or who has attempted or completed suicide. So it's not a lack of knowledge out there as far as having a personal experience.
When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about what our viewers can do to help the foundation and to help themselves and their loved ones. So please stay tuned to You Be the Judge. I'm Todd O'Malley with the law offices of O'Malley & Langen. If I say accident, what do you think? Car crash, falling down the steps, unexpected events. People don't realize most of these accidents aren't really accidents. They're injuries caused by careless third parties. So if you've been hurt at work, call O'Malley & Langen. 1-800-817-COMP. 1-800-817-2667. Welcome back. Christine, the work that you do with schools, how do they know how to reach you, and what can we do to make sure that as many school districts as possible are utilizing your services? Number one, does it cost the district anything?
No, and that's one of the best things is that our foundation provides the seminars, the resources, all free of charge.
And we have your website up. All they have to do is go to your website, contact the foundation,
Yes.
and someone will arrange for you folks to come out and talk to them and give the PowerPoint and be available to their students?
Yes, absolutely. They can reach out. We'll get back to them. We'll schedule in as little as a week or two, or we can go out further for a month or so. We already have a bunch of schools booked for the beginning of the school year. We're definitely looking to get into more schools.
And of course, again, when you visit the website, there's a place for you to make a contribution. You make a contribution in the name of a loved one who's passed on with suicide. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my good friends from the Northeast Suicide Prevention Initiative. They're going to be having a suicide walk on September 6th around the Lackawanna County Courthouse. So that's another opportunity to show support for these great organizations. What's the average time that it takes you to get into a school? I mean, if a school calls you and says, we've only got a couple days for you to come, will you be able to get there that quickly?
Depending on our schedules, we do our absolute best to get in. Between Vanessa and I, we definitely do what we have to do to get there.
In the school district, you may see the kids or you may see the faculty at an in-service.
Right, we'll do the faculty. We can speak to them at an in-service or a day of their choosing. And then the students, we can just set up whatever date that they need.
How are the school nurses reacting to this?
Well, not only is the school nurses, the teachers, but also the guidance counselors, the school counselors. We see an increased awareness among the issues that are going on with the students. They not only, you had mentioned the college RAs earlier, including all of them, there's such a increase of self-disclosure among the students when they're able to say, okay, here's somebody who understands where I'm coming from. They feel comfortable speaking out, not only to us, but they go to their guidance counselors, they go to the principal. We've escorted people to the principal, had parents become involved. It seems to really open up a channel for them where they feel comfortable.
Is there a hotline that someone can call that would be?
There's the National Suicide Hotline. That's 1-800-273-TALK.
And that's on our screen, 1-800-273-TALK.
Right.
And that's a national hotline.
Yes.
And the children that you see, do you have trouble getting them to open up to you? Or do they pretty much?
It's really interesting to me because I feel like once they hear somebody, maybe not related to them or even friends with them, and depending on how we present, it's been pretty comfortable for them, I think, to have when they come up and they'll just be sharing these heart-wrenching stories or examples of when they were having suicidal thoughts or trouble at home. They seem to feel very comfortable with sharing after the presentations.
Well, thank you to both of you for the great work that you do, and thank you to Carla Fiorina and her sister for forming this great foundation. And to our viewers, please visit the website, make a contribution, and if you have anyone that you feel needs to be talked to, call the National Hotline. Thank you for sharing your Sunday morning with us on
If you are disabled and unable to work, you may be entitled to Social Security benefits. In order to obtain benefits, you must prove your disability is severe enough to keep you from working. Social Security is financed through a dedicated payroll tax. If you have been paying taxes, then you have been paying into Social Security. And if you are no longer able to work, you've earned your rights to your Social Security benefits. Call the lawyers at O'Malley & Langen, representing Social Security claimants for a quarter of a century.